ultra strong. A hunter who's part demon?
You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. Sound Ideas' highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiences. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Ideas proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Hello everyone, and welcome to Tonebenders, where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. My name is Tim Muirhead, and I'm not actually going to be your host today, because this episode is a re-podcast of an interview that originally appeared on a series called The Creative Leaders. If you're unfamiliar with this show, you should check it out. Although this episode is focused on the sound of K-pop demon hunters, most of the episodes from The Creative Leaders focus on conversations with producers and top creatives working in animation and gaming. I find listening to this series is great for getting insight to what the work life is like for a producer or an animator or other people working on projects that we are just focused on the sound for. This interview you are about to hear is with Michael Babcock from the sound team of K-pop Demon Hunters. Michael has been on Tonebenders multiple times before and is a great person to talk with. I was originally planning to do an interview with Michael myself about K-pop Demon Hunters, but then my 9-year-old daughter got a hold of it, and now she is completely and utterly obsessed with this film. She watches it with regularity, knows all of the songs inside and out, and it is the main topic of conversation with all her friends on our walks to school in the morning. This animated film has become a true international, worldwide sensation. The best part about it is it's actually good. Sometimes kids have kind of questionable taste in these things, but that's not the case here. So with this film and its music completely taking over my household, I thought I would let someone else handle the interview for this film. It's just too much up in my head currently. So taking over for this interview will be Stephen Scott of the Creative Leaders podcast. Before we get to the interview, a reminder about the upcoming Tonebenders event in Mexico City on October 21st. Starting at 4 p.m., there will be a couple of panels featuring some of the top sound people in Mexico, followed by free dinner and drinks for a Tonebenders sound design meetup. Big thanks to the sponsors for this event, the SAE Institute Mexico, and the Motion Picture Sound Editors. We will be announcing the full lineup of the amazing people that will be taking part in the event soon, so stay tuned. Okay, let's talk some K-pop Demon Hunters with Michael Babcock. The interview will start with Michael discussing how he first got on board for the project.
It came to me because I kind of knew through a friend, some people that worked on the show. Basically got myself an interview with help from Sony. Sony put me up for the show, and I talked to some of the creative people on it beforehand. I think one of the things that seemed to be a good fit with the creative people over there is that I also have a music background. That was probably the biggest thing. Some of the experience that I've had in other animation, I think I had like maybe 2 interviews with the directors and the producers, and everybody was really nice. But this was not a easy creative movie for anybody on the production, from storyboards up, from the script, storyboard, whatever up. It was not easy because you're dealing with an original story for one. There's some cultural things, and there's just a lot of things that had to work pacing wise. And there's also a sensibility that boils even right down to the sound design of it, of just kind of like an aesthetic. Actually, I'm going to kind of interrupt myself and say that this might be one of the most challenging, well, it is one of the most challenging things I've ever worked on. It might be the highest. And I mean that like proudly because it's really it's hard to find the right tone. Like there's some really great sound designers out there that are great at making things that are really aggressive and are super creative and, just great people and do great work. This you have to clue into other things. You have to have a music aesthetic, which is actually something I sold to them as like at least because I need personally as a creative thing, I need a starting point. And my starting point was, hey, any sound that goes in this movie, K-pop music in general has a very distinct production or like a very distinct sound. And my thought was like, hey, great starting point is to, anything, start thinking about whether it's reverbs or delays or like, layered vocals and, tightly mastered, beats against vocals and harmonies and just using some of those tools to like, even like taking a simple whoosh and like putting it through a normal kind of spatial thing or a delay thing that you would use in a K-pop tune. So I was kind of trying to think more as like a music production person for any of the sound design. At least I needed that as a starting point. So even you have like a simple sound, it gets so you're not just like making something, a big explosion and being aggressive. Like it has to be musical. You have to be very conscious of rhythmic type things. And those are kind of the things I started saying, which I think helped them convey their vision to me, and they had a very definitive one. So, and it was a process to get there. I learned a lot of plugins that I actually had wanted to learn and didn't know, like that are pretty much used for music. Like we have great stuff that we can use in you know post production sound, but very purposely going after things that are more on the music side. And just for me, that was liberating. Of like, even if it's just like a different reverb, like not the normal thing you'd use, just like going after some of that stuff. I found was a very liberating way of not getting stuck. Keep finding things.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point and a really interesting way of looking at it to sort of say, well, what's our jumping off point here? And, can we look at the sound design and design it from a musical perspective, from what possibilities, I guess, does that open up? And because in post-production, we do tend to have maybe just like a few plugins that are kind of go-tos all the time. And, we don't need as many as we would do in music.
I mean, there's always a couple of like fun things, but like
Yeah.
mostly stuff that we don't use because we don't have to. Some of it's just because like you're working in Atmos or even designing in Atmos these days. So like a lot of these, and I actually discovered some plugins that were not expensive at all, and they were stereo plugins. I'm like, these are fantastic, and they're not the kind of things that I would even think of using just because it's not doing something in Atmos. I tend to think that way. So, which is so that was great.
And what did they have in terms of materials at that stage, or the very early stage, to show you?
They they had this, they had a story, and I was lucky enough to see a bunch of iterations throughout, like even like a year before I started working on it, where they were going with it. And they did a really good job with their temp. Even if they were just storyboards, because you get a feel of what it is that works. Um, what I did see, and it's the first things that we talked about. There's so much overlap. There's so much overlap between design, certainly music, and the songs, and the vocals and dialogue treatments in general.
Yeah.
And what was just an awesome thing is like I also happen to be the guy mixing the music and the dialogue on it too. So I was also applying a lot of those treatments to like the demon voices and the reverb treatments. And kind of jumping ahead a little bit, one of the coolest things that I've done in my career is that during I got couple weeks to do music pre-dubs on the songs to, put the songs into Atmos.
Yeah.
And the person who mixed it, this guy named Curtis, he he actually works out of Phoenix, and he flew into town for the week and sat with me as I, and went through it. And he discovered when he was trying to split everything out into stems. So here's your background vocals, here's your normal vocals, here's the synth stuff, here's the bass stuff, here's drums or whatever. He felt that he is I learned a lot from him. He may have learned a bit from me too. There's a lot of cross-pollination thing going on, but I learned a lot about the mastering process, which is a big deal. I think maybe even the biggest deal to some degree. When sonically, the biggest deal. I mean, arrangement and the song itself is important, way more important. But how much the mastering is such a big deal, and this guy, specializes in that. But what was really great sitting with him, first of all, I had to do a science project. Because he didn't like how his stems were sounding when they were summed back together, and the mixes sound amazing. So he's not wrong. Can't replicate that. And so I ended up having to do a science project and basically build his mastering chain in Atmos. It was a science project, and the only part that wasn't a science project was that some of the project was just trying things and listening to it, because I wanted the ability to what happens when you move things. So I kind of came up with a way to hit his mastering chain so it was sounding the way he wanted, and then finding ways to spread it around and atmatize it and do that kind of stuff. But the best thing about that week is some of the processing that he used. Like I would turn around and go, hey, I love this reverb. I would really love to find a way to put this into Atmos. Not just the stereo thing. Like, can you show? And he would have the plugin right there, and he would give me the setting for the plugin, and I would just build that. Do multiple instantiations of it, and just be able to build that into Atmos. So sitting with him, he's like me. He works virtually but in the music world. So you could kind of strip it back, and you're still making the same thing that's on the stereo record, but you have a way of just making an Atmos.
Yeah.
Which is that was huge. And a lot of that, there's a lot of crossover between some of the treatments I use, whether you're in a stadium or even on some of the vocal stuff that ended up as just part of the vocal processing. I mean, I should say dialogue processing in certain places.
And is this the first? I guess you'd call it a musical. Is this the first musical you've worked on, certainly to this extent, where there's this many songs in it that are pop songs, really highly produced, loud, because that's a really tough job to mix that in a film.
Yeah, I've done other ones that were, I have a couple of things that were like musical or musical centric, or had like a couple performing things. This was the most intensive, as far as actually that thing I just said, of trying to. There was a real concern, and it's not just a creative concern. It was a concern by the record company, the KPop record company, and the the executive music producer, Ian Eisendrath, who, is a publisher of the music and produced the music. There was a concern of like, hey, yes, this has to be theatrical, but also K-pop has a sound and people are going to be listening to it. And it can't be that different. So there was a concern about that. So that science project seemed to kind of be able to do the best of both worlds. I guess to answer your question, it's one of the toughest things I've ever done, is because I have a pretty nice home theater Atmos setup at home, and Apple Music and like Tidal and some other ones, but I have Apple Music streams Atmos music if it's available. And I purposely have sat down and tried to listen to music, if anything, to learn and open my ears and just kind of enjoy stuff. And actually, one of the first conversations I had with the music producer was like, I'm going to put this out there. I'm a immersive audio guy. But most of the music mixes that I hear that are either redone in Atmos or what I don't like. And I'm trying to keep an open mind about that. Like I'm trying to think that, maybe it's because I have certain aesthetics that I've kind of gravitated towards because I'm kind of like a film guy. But a lot of it I think actually has to do with the mastering. And especially on stuff that gets remixed. Like there's certain hit tunes out there that have a sound to it. And you don't realize, it actually might be the mastering or the production. And, you can break a song actually by remixing a certain way. And 30% of the stuff that gets remixed up there is fantastic. I can go down a rabbit hole with this whole thing, but that's one of the first things I said, look, I have some concerns. So the science project kind of, I think made that part better, but it also proved to me why it doesn't happen. Because trying to reverse engineer that for every single song, I can see would be it's not the easiest thing to do. There's a lot of technical pitfalls.
Yeah.
I think some of this I got a little bit lucky. Like I have to admit, I'm an engineer would probably be upset with me at certain points because I literally had to go back and forth between, listening to certain elements and literally trying things. So some of the things ended up by ear. There's no science as far as I just was messing around with different settings in a way that I bust stuff. And I just find like, oh, okay, that seems to be matching like that. So it was a perilous journey. It was like, kind of triumphant at times, but you also have this background politics that as a, we hate to say it, as a creative person, sometimes you have to explain what you're doing.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think haven't come up with a way of like, well, I kind of listened to it and it seemed good.
Yeah. And was this the first part of the film that you worked on, get the songs together first and then move on? Or
actually, no, it was one of the last things.
Right.
I sound design pretty early and there wasn't a lot of animation done. So really for the first couple months, myself and Jeff Sawyer, who's really the other main sound designer, and Katie Holliday, I'm like, okay, let's record a bunch of stuff. And then let's start processing a bunch of stuff. Actually, the first thing I did long before was they had a lot of concerns about, they called it the demon treatment.
Yep.
And whether it was Guima, which is the big fire guy, and or all the demons that are walking around. And they all needed a treatment, or at least they wanted a treatment that kind of showed when they were negative or they were from that underworld. And so they wanted them to link, all those characters. So I frankly, for like a month, I tried probably 80 different things of like, hey, do you like this? Cool. Like this. Cool. And I just gave them a bunch of stuff and just to see if what they reacted to. And it basically was getting homed in to the very end, but that's the first thing I started with. And actually the last thing creatively that I probably did, but that was the biggest thing, and which was helpful because there wasn't as much animation as needed. But what's great is that you can base it off a performance, like a vocal performance, a dialogue performance, and it's more story and performance based, so you don't necessarily need a visual. Now the visual helped. It knows that it actually makes it sound better because you've gone the right direction once you actually get that final animation in. But that was the first thing. But then we did a lot of recording and processing of like, oh, this is what the portals could sound like. And so, and back to that like musical idea, I still wanted to keep it organic. They kept talking like the swords that they have. Their temp stuff was all like conventional sword sounds. And they said, we don't necessarily want conventional sword sounds. It needs to be more magical, which is actually, I think, a word that they used a lot. Magical is a tough word to do because there's a difference between magical and fun and like aggressive.
Dark magical or
Light magic, happy magic. Yeah.
Right. And there's also a point because they also said, we'd love this to be pitched to the music,
Okay.
and any kind of hits need to be on the beat. Which is actually the music department gave us metronome beat tracks that they were both scoring to and doing the songs to. So we were able to actually cut to the beat. And then you actually have to, after you do it to the beat, you still have to listen to it because sometimes I spent a lot of nights just going through the feel, like the way you'd use a quantizer, like you could actually like on Logic or whatever, you could just say quantize this. I was kind of doing it by ear because even if it was on the beat, you'd kind of like nudge things by quarter frames and it would sound more like it was on the beat. But the swords, I still wanted to have it. I didn't want it to be, with all due respect, a lightsaber. And so I tried, it had to have at least some kind of organic thing. So I bought from Amazon a whole pack of tuning forks.
Oh.
And recorded them at high sample rates, and we pitched them and manipulated them. And it has a metallic sound and it's organic, but it doesn't have that kind of like super aggressive, and it's also musical. So we were pitching it to either the score or the song that was there. So that was basically our first couple months, just recording a bunch of things and just throwing a bunch of fun spaghetti against the wall that eventually kept getting honed in as we kept getting sequences and animation and meeting with them too, because they were learning what their taste was. They knew their story really well, and they knew what they wanted to feel. And they knew it when it was right.
Yeah. Like we know it when we hear it. How much of the sound in the film would you say was put together from your own recordings, field recordings, versus working with libraries and flying in effects and building up the sound design from that? I
want to say, even down to a lot of the backgrounds, I would say it was 50-50. Mm-hmm. Some of the backgrounds were library things. Technically, they're in Korea, and when they're outside, I wanted to have Korea. They never say it, but I think they're in Seoul. I mean, I actually asked them, like, are they in Seoul? And like, yeah, probably. I actually had to buy. I went through all of the stuff that I had and that other people had. It was actually kind of hard to find, but I had to buy some Korean like city backgrounds just to be authentic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say 50, well, maybe 60-40, 50-50. Like a lot of it's very much recorded. Certainly everything was manipulated, even if it came from something that we had or were combining together. It all went through this whole like, let's use some of these tools to manipulate kind of.
Yeah. And just on backgrounds there, I love cutting backgrounds. That's my favorite thing to do. How granular do you get when you're cutting your backgrounds, especially when we're working in Atmos now?
I actually get pretty granular. Mm-hmm. I have a whole pre-dub of things that are spotted, and that's more than just like picking the right sound and putting it in there and putting it at a level and placing it in the room, that kind of stuff. Like, you're kind of telling a story that helps the story, but also can't be distracted. So I'm possibly too granular sometimes with backgrounds because sometimes actually they did a nice thing. That Maggie, the director, for whatever reason, doesn't like crickets. I did research and they do have crickets in Korea, but she just didn't like the feeling of them. She wanted to feel more of an open space.
Yeah.
So even if you're thinning out a scene, a lot of the outdoor scenes are like that, and they really wanted to go with a feeling because there's some nice breathing room in the movie. There's not music in some of those scenes, so it's just about talking and the backgrounds. And so even when you're dealing with like wind and background things, it's you have to really find the right one because it's you're auditioning. Like, I don't know how many winds is like you have me off on a tangent now. I get super granular with winds because winds really do convey a certain kind of feeling. Like they can be scary. It's hard to find a warm wind So even if that's the only sound being played in the scene, there is probably a lot of winds that were tried out that are not in the movie. I'll just say that.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose the thing with winds is they can be so musical as well, right? So all you have to do is put an EQ on there, and you can change the tone of that wind sound entirely, which I guess ties in nicely to a film like this.
You get it. You get it. There are frequencies.
Yes.
This is actually something in maybe the last 5 years, because I used to be just trying to find the right sound. Frequencies completely change the character of wind.
Yeah.
So you're right on.
Yeah. Just jumping back a second there to the demon voices. So I wanted to ask you about that and how you achieved the design of the demon voices. Things like when Rumi gets angry and it kind of slips out. And I mean, it sounds like you tried a lot of different things, if you can remember. But what was the processing applied to that? What were some of the tools? How did you achieve that sound?
That was well, the main part of the demon voice was using their voice. And even with all the background demons, like we did a whole session with the loop group, and they came in and made noises. And generally, it was it ended up being a relatively simple. It took a long time to find the right thing, but it ended up being a relatively simple setting where I'm doing a little bit of a pitch on it, and then a little bit of a aggressive chorus with like a modulating chorus with one of the Valhalla plugins. And what was great about that is that, because I was actually stressing about this, like I was able to come up with a lot of cool different treatments, but making it seem like it was all the same, like connecting it from the big guy to the little person, and like and to Rumi, to make it sound like as they got angrier, they're being pulled, by their negative demons inside, to have it connect. So that ended up being kind of great, because it just having it's basically it's a warble.
Yeah.
You kept saying things like it's almost like she's talking underwater. So
Right,
that I
yeah.
kept trying to find ways to go after that. And so it was basically those two plugins, and then just some crazy delay stuttering stuff that, like, when they get really angry and they kind of make a shockwave.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a bunch of different delay plugins and music ones.
Yeah.
Delay plugins, and actually I want to shout out to a plugin that I had never used, but now I'm using all the time. It's a pitching plugin that I'm having a mental blank. It'll come back to me. But I will say this, as far as pitching plugins go, Meta Pitch is one that, at least being able to manipulate things in real time, I've yet to hear a better sounding real time pitch shifter, because it also, character also. That turned out to be really useful.
Right.
So it was a relatively simple setting to start with, and then you're kind of manipulating it based on their performance, because it hits the processing differently depending on where they're talking or how they're talking.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Okay, I'll check that out. And what about the time scale then on this project? What was that like in terms of, how long were you and your team working on the editorial and sound design side of things before then, getting into like pre-dubs and finals?
It was, well, we were probably on it for a good 6 months before we were in I was kind of always in the mixing phase, and like mixing things down either to present to them or to carry the work on, and was kind of jumping on to different things. I was sometimes working on dialogue treatment, sometimes I was working on actually some of the music stuff. And then about a month before we started the final mix, Tony Lamberti, the effects mixer, came on, and then I started sending him stuff like, here's all the backgrounds, because I would take a pass through it, and then he would take, he's a great mixer, and he's great at just, taking whatever he gets and, making it better and making decisions. He's also worked on a lot of animation too, so he knows what's gonna really be, sharp and, to the point and what's gonna tell the story. So I was kind of always in mix mode. The last thing I really did was do the music pre-dubs. But because we had a lot of animation coming in late, we were kind of doing it up to the very end,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
moving off. Like when we weren't filing, I was kind of running to the other room to, pre-dub some dialogue on a sequence, or Tony was getting some new sound design stuff as we got visuals. Particularly at the end of the movie, we didn't see the stadium scene, which looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's just dark and pink somehow.
Yeah.
We didn't really see that to the last week.
Right.
And we had built a lot of stuff, but we're kind of it was a work in progress until the very end. And some of that energy, in some ways, that was good because a lot of the energy of just like, oh, that's cool, let's do this, carried all the way to like the last day.
Right. And so what are you working with then? Most of the time, is it previs, or were some sequences even just storyboards, up until that point?
When I started, there was some storyboards. There were some sequences that were done. There was a lot of the animation was done about 3 months before we went on to the final.
Right.
But for sound, and I'm sure you know this, that doesn't mean that we're home free for 3 months. The last thing they do, like layering wise, is what they're doing to animation is the lighting, and that's us.
Yeah.
Anything that like lightning or sparks or whatever, like basically stuff that needs sound, that is the last process, and we were getting that up until like almost a couple days before we were done. So we were chasing something. By then we had a library and a vocabulary because we had those first few months of recording things and having enough sequences to work on gave us a vocabulary, but we were definitely honing it in.
Yeah. And how are you working these days on on these films? Do you tend to work for the majority of the sound editorial phase from from a home studio, or were you in your studio at Sony most of the time working in Atmos? How do you like, what's your workflow like for this?
On that one, I was at Sony the whole time, because at Sony I have my room is a dub stage. I did all my pre-dubbing in that dub stage. In fact, any movie I work on, I pre-dub in there on purpose. I've even finaled the movie in there.
Right.
It's a smaller room, but one of the reasons why is like I just felt like no matter what it was, even if it was like Foley, it's like I want to be in Atmos at all times. I'm always saying I'm always experimenting with what the treatment is, and it's like if I come up with a treatment that works in this room, I can immediately apply that to dialogue, or I know what I'm going to grab when I'm on the music stuff. So I just always felt like the best place for me to be was just in the studio.
Yeah.
I was always in mix mode.
Yeah, I suppose that's the easiest way to do it, isn't it? Just mix as you go. And what side of the console were you on for the mix of this film?
On the final, I was the dialogue and music.
Right. And what was the mix schedule like for this film? Was it quite a compressed period of time?
It wasn't compressed, but it was full.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on in the entire movie, and there's a lot of different layers, and I think we ended up getting about a month for the final, which is great, which is a healthy amount of time, but we used all of it.
Yeah.
we definitely used all of it because we also needed to spend some time on the big stage with the songs and the music crew.
Yeah.
Really making the songs sing, and in that environment, and them being comfortable with some of the added design that was in some of the songs, and so we kind of mixed non-linearly in a way. Like we do a reel, but then we go back and work on this one thing, which isn't always a bad way to work. you're just kind of developing this like one thing is informing the other. Like, oh, it was kind of not. We actually didn't start with Reel 1 because one of the sequences we didn't have enough animation on, so I think we started mixing in Reel 2. So I think we mixed 2 through 5, and then was something like that. And what was kind of good about that is it informed how, like, the first 10 minutes of any animated thing really sets the tone of the entire movie, the story, the look, the sound, like the just the tone. So it's actually kind of a luxury to be able to work on the first reel last, because we had established this whole vocabulary, and it just, I feel like that it's a really strong first reel. We've all worked on things. This isn't necessarily a critique, but a lot of Reel 1s get picked apart because there's a lot of like, ooh, is this okay? And it becomes a little bit like, oh, it sounds good because it works. And it's almost like you've made it vanilla because you've been able to draw the line from A to B. This has a little bit more teeth on it. And because of that, because people were confident of like, oh, that's great, this will work, this kind of thing. So sometimes nonlinear is a luxury.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that because obviously I was lucky enough to be able to sit and watch the film on an Atmos dub stage here, at Big Mouth Audio, and I know you love a subwoofer, Michael, and it's like when you hear that first sequence with the song coming in, man, it's like big and it really hits you, and you're like, right, okay, I see what this, what I'm in for here with this film. It really does kind of hit you right from the start, and it's big and it's loud and it's powerful. But I guess a question on that then is, how do you approach the mix? Particularly around these sequences where you've got these big songs, and and how do you fit other things into that, sound effects and backgrounds and music and score and things like that, because that's there's so much going on.
Actually, we discovered if you're very, 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 very strategic with the kind of sound you're using, and if they're on the beat, or that it's actually not that hard. It comes down to a taste thing. They wanted a lot of the songs to be like a music video.
Yeah.
And especially that first one, because that just sets up the whole tone. But we actually ended up putting a lot more stuff in there than even I thought we were going to get in there, because it was in the beat, or it was in, it worked with the music. It wasn't drawing attention to himself.
Yeah.
And there was actually, I had, because we had time and we had the songs, I did do some experimentation with some of our sound designers. Actually, one of my friends actually, who worked on it for a few weeks. And this was such a luxury. I'm like, hey, come up with a whole vocabulary of what you would consider K-pop type production, beat hits, like you're hitting, you're hitting cuts with certain things, but it has to be to the beat. Just come up with a library of really cool stuff, because he's actually someone who's really good at that. And he did that. And we got it to work with the music, and some of that stuff's still in there. We kind of did it as an exercise to see, and it was kind of cool. Like, how much can we get away with? Because this whole, like, I just kind of like the whole idea of like, hey, we're using production. It's also part of the sound design, and everybody's shaking hands, and that's just really cool. But I was kind of under no illusion, because generally the music department, it's like, it's about the music. Well, it is, but they ended up being more open to, if it wasn't offensive, and it was serving it to stuff. So some of that stuff, actually, whether they realize it or not, is actually in there, and it just helps some of the dynamics. And because it actually is a challenge, because that stuff is so mastered dynamically. You have to be really strategic with where it goes. So, but sometimes it does the opposite, where if you have something on a beat, it actually is making it dynamic, at least theatrically. Because this big, at least when we were mixing in a huge theater. You have you actually have room for it, and it's not offensive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another question on the mixing side of things would be, I suppose, one, the use of Atmos that and the Atmos technology that you have available, but at the same time keeping in mind that you probably knowing that the film was effectively being made for Netflix for streaming. I guess it's what I'm saying is, how does that affect your decision making when you're on the dub stage?
We knew it was going to go to Netflix. My stance is, unless someone tells me different, is that I don't care. I mix it theatrically, and there was a whole process where I did a near field mix of it. But I feel like if you mix it for the theater, uh, 90% of the time, that works. The way we're kind of mixing these days, a lot of those dynamics work. And actually, on this one, in some ways, um, because that music is so well mastered, the only thing you're really doing when you're streaming on Netflix is you have to hit a spec, and in some ways, that kind of master music kind of helps the spec. You just have to watch some of the dynamics in places, but you're generally hearing a very theatrical mix. And I find even watching it at home, you get a better experience starting that way and thinking that way. And yes, you have to make some tweaks, especially like for like a stereo mix. But it's I think creatively, I don't like to think about, oh, we have to. I don't like the X factor. I'd like to kind of, the X factor should come to us, and I think most of the time that works. That works better. If you're kind of second guessing because you're looking, if you're mixing for numbers,
Yeah.
with what like some of the streaming is, like that Netflix spec and most streaming specs are actually not that bad. Like most theatrical mixes fit pretty well into making that work. And I also like to, some people, this is why I ended up not mixing music for a living, as much as I love mixing music and just living in that world. And I mean like albums and stuff, not necessarily in the film sense, was mixing for the X factor. Um or like mixing like, oh, this will sound great in somebody's boombox, or this sound, and if you mix it right, it'll sound good in a boombox. It'll sound good on your laptop if you're kind of doing it the right way. This is my opinion, but like I'm kind of mixing for that guy that has a ridiculous setup in his house and he's streaming Netflix that.
Yeah, exactly.
I always gravitated to like, I would listen to recordings just because they were audiophile recordings. I'd be listening to like crappy pop music just because it was done by a certain person or master or like, mixed a certain way and it just sounded really good. So, but that's me.
Yeah, I get it. You can't mix for something that might be like a really nice sound bar, or maybe somebody's got a home Atmos setup, or maybe just TV speakers. I suppose if you just mix in the best way you can to start with, and I guess that's why so many people are mixing natively in Atmos now, because the fold down sounds so good or better.
That's the other part of it too. Like dynamically, like certainly you have to make some adjustments on certain things when you're in the near field, because you have to realize that people do need to listen to this on a laptop. You want to just make sure it's all there. Usually has more to do with like backgrounds and just big dynamic stuff.
Yeah.
But wait, sorry, what did you just say? But
mixing in Atmos natively and then the kind of fold down.
I really that's the other thing. Whenever somebody asks me like, should we mix this in Atmos? And I'm like, yes. Even if like most people aren't going to hear it in Atmos, the mix down that the RMU software does, I think makes your 5.1 more immersive somehow. It's awful close. Like when I A/B in the theater, especially when I'm doing the theatrical thing, I'm going between theatrical Atmos and theatrical 5.1. I'm amazed of how good of a job it does, actually still feeling like, well, that's the mix, even spatially. So I just feel like starting and then coming down.
Yeah.
But when you get to stereo, you got to just kind of make sure it's doing the right thing. But it's Atmos, love it.
I guess then, just to kind of wrap up, is there a favorite sequence or scene or part of the film that you enjoyed working on the most, or that you're most proud of?
There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm like, looking at my career, I'm super proud of because it really married music and, design stuff. Which those are my two worlds in general. So almost the whole movie does that. So just the taste of it. There's a lot of sequences I like. I think my favorite one is actually more music than it even is like sound design. That whole basically the sequence at the end, um, when the Saja boys come and do their, My Idol, and then that goes into the big finale. Like there's sound design in there that things that are really cool, and Glima's voice, the treatment that's like, but that whole ending is so epic.
Yeah.
And it gets me every time because the music is so good, and to feel like that, I don't know, this is just the stuff I love working on. So I'd have to say basically the last 20 minutes of that. Like, there's other sequences that are great where, like, some that sword fight where they go into the bathhouse, and the score is great and blaring through there. But we managed to get the score and the sound design and the dialogue in it like that. To me, that's in a way that's an achievement to be able to get all the things in it. We kind of almost broke the rule of, you can only get so many things in at once. It's like the 2.5 rule. Like, you only get like music, dialogue, and a half of another thing. Or I feel like we have like 3 things, or like 3.5. But that would be my answer. That the end of the movie just it for lack of an elegant way of putting it, it kicks ass.
Yeah.
It's really emotionally great. It gets me every time.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking that when I watched that sequence as well, that, this would be like the dream project to work on because, not only is it a 10 out of 10 film, but I think films like this, it's not just, the sound design and, the music. It's actually the mix that does so much, I think, to drive the emotion and really get it to that level of achieving, the emotional response that you want from it. And that's maybe like underestimated sometimes, but I think, especially that last 20 minutes, the mix really gets you.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment because that's kind of how I feel about it. It's like that mix at the end is aggressive. It's aggressive for Netflix. It's aggressive when you watch in the theater and like full theatrical atmos. Like it's dynamic, and it's killer. And no speaker is left behind. And what was great is that even the music people were they were all for that. So yeah, it's the that's I don't know how I would have mixed that last part differently. It's exactly like how I would wish anyone would do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Everybody's done such an amazing job on it. So what's next then for you? Where can people hear your work next?
Actually, I finished a movie. I technically finished it right before I started K-pop, and then I went back into it not more like a little over a month ago. That's coming out in November, called Nuremberg. And man, it's such a good movie, and it's so timely. It's Russell Crowe and Rami Malek, and part of it's about the trials of Nuremberg, but Russell Crowe plays Hermann Goering, who after Hitler was killed, he basically was Hitler. And they captured him, and this is based on a true story. The army. Our army sent a bunch of people over to Nuremberg to interview what was left of the Nazis to figure out. And when I mean interview, they sent over psychiatrists, psychologists, to be like, why did you do all these things? And just trying to figure them out. And it's a great movie. And boy, does it speak to the times. It's certainly in our country, right now. But that's the next thing. And I'm starting a little bit of design on the next Dune movie.
Nice, excellent. Well, we'll look forward to those, but I won't keep you much longer because we've probably already taken up enough of your time. It's been great to catch up with you, Michael, and chat about the film.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for letting me go off. It's
Oh, no worries at all. No worries. It's as I say, it's such a great film, and it's just really nice to be able to chat to you about it just now while there's so much going on about it. And I'm sure a lot of people will be really interested to kind of get this little peek behind the scenes, so to speak.
Well, and you got it too. It's thanks for poking me. You definitely noticed the right things.
Hey everyone, it's Tim again. Big thanks to the Creative Leaders Podcast and Stephen Scott for hosting this interview and letting Tonebenders repodcast it. Listeners in the Mexico City area, mark your calendars for the Tonebenders event there on October 21st. Full details are coming soon. Sound Idea's highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiances. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Idea's proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.